There's a specific kind of embarrassment that comes with buying something you loved when you were 9. Not nostalgia, not whimsy, embarrassment. The kind where you browse alone, where you don't mention it at dinner, where the Amazon package sits unopened for 2 days, because some part of you hasn't decided if this is allowed yet. Adults are returning to childhood interests in record numbers and doing it quietly, not as a trend, not as self-care, as something closer to trespassing. The behavior itself is ordinary. Someone buys watercolors again after 20 years. Another person starts collecting action figures they couldn't afford as a kid. Someone else picks up roller skating or rereads a book series they memorized at 12, or joins an adult recreational soccer league that feels less like exercise and more like archaeology. The return is specific. It's not new hobbies, it's old ones. And the interesting part isn't that people do this. It's that they do it with the same carefulness you'd use handling someone else's mail. Like they're visiting a part of themselves they're no longer supposed to have access to. Here's what makes it strange. Children don't need permission to like things. A 7-year-old doesn't justify why they're into dinosaurs. They don't moderate their enthusiasm or explain the value. They just are. Adults don't get that option, or they don't take that option. Because at some point, usually without announcement, interest gets reclassified. What was once neutral becomes suspicious. What was once play becomes indulgent. What was once part of identity becomes something you're supposed to have outgrown. And the shift happens so gradually that most people don't notice it until they're standing in a store aisle, holding something they used to love, wondering if buying it makes them childish or just honest. The return usually happens in a specific window, late 20s, early 30s, sometimes later. It's not random. It happens after the checklist, after you've done the things you were told would make you feel like an adult. The degree, the job, the apartment that doesn't have a roommate's name on the lease, the relationship milestones, the routines that were supposed to feel like a rival. And then, somewhere in the steadiness, there's a gap. Not a crisis, not even dissatisfaction, just a quiet awareness that the life you built is missing something you didn't know you were allowed to miss. The friction starts small. Someone mentions a show they loved as a kid, and you feel the pull to rewatch it, but you don't. Because it feels regressive, because there's no reason to. You pass a hobby shop and feel the old draw toward model kits or art supplies, but you keep walking. Because you're busy, because you wouldn't know what to do with them anyway. You think about the things you used to do just because they were interesting, and you realize you can't remember the last time you did anything that wasn't also productive. Somewhere along the way, interest became conditional. It needs justification now. A social excuse or a developmental benefit, or at least a story that makes sense when someone asks what you did this weekend. Play, actual play, the kind with no outcome, became something you can't quite locate anymore. And then one day, for no especially good reason, you buy the thing. The sketchbook, the video game, the novel you read 7 times in middle school. And the first feeling isn't joy, it's discomfort. Because it doesn't fit, not into your schedule, not into the apartment, not into the version of yourself you've been performing for the last decade. It's like putting on a jacket that used to be yours and realizing the sleeves are too short. But you wore this every day once. You lived in this. So what changed? Here's the tension no one talks about. Childhood interests aren't inherently pure or meaningful. They're just unedited. A kid likes something because it sparks something, because it's fun or strange or makes them feel capable, because it asks nothing of them except attention. There's no optimization, no identity signaling, no awareness of how it looks from the outside, just direct, unself-conscious engagement. And that kind of engagement, play without witness, interest without defense, doesn't survive adolescence intact. Because at some point, you learn to audition your interests. You learn which ones make you seem smart, which ones make you seem weird, which ones are acceptable in public, and which ones you keep offline. You learn to be curatorial about joy, and once that lens is in place, it doesn't come off easy. So when someone returns to a childhood interest, they're not chasing nostalgia. They're trying to remember what it felt like to want something without asking permission first. To like something because they liked it, not because it fit a narrative or improved them or made sense to explain. It's not about the hobby, it's about the relationship to desire itself. The strange part is how fragile the return feels, even after buying the supplies, even after clearing the space. There's a self-consciousness that wasn't there before. You sit down to draw and immediately evaluate whether you're good at it, whether it's worth the time, whether this is something a person your age should still care about. The doing is interrupted by the watching, and that watching, that constant self-monitoring, is the real difference. A child drawing a dragon isn't worried about whether it's good. They're just drawing a dragon. An adult drawing a dragon is managing an audience of one, wondering if this makes them seem stunted, wondering if they should be doing something more age-appropriate, wondering if enjoyment needs a better reason than itself. The interest is the same. The relationship to it is unrecognizable. There's a specific kind of grief in this, not for childhood itself, but for the version of attention you used to have. The ability to be in something without also being above it, to care without curation, to try without performance. Somewhere in the transition to adulthood, interest became content. Everything you do is potential material, a story for later, a post, an explanation. Even hobbies have become resume items. I'm learning guitar. I'm into running now. I picked up woodworking. All of it spoken outward, all of it shaped for an audience. And childhood interests don't fit that frame, because they were never for anyone else. They were private, purposeless, pursued with the kind of intensity that doesn't make sense from the outside, which is exactly why returning to them feels like breaking a rule you didn't know you'd agreed to. Here's what happens when the friction eases. It doesn't feel like joy. It feels like exhaling, like remembering you're allowed to take up space doing something that doesn't produce value. The embarrassment doesn't disappear, but it becomes quieter. You stop needing the hobby to mean something. You stop defending it in your head. You just do it. And in that doing, there's a small recognition. You've been performing adulthood so carefully that you forgot what you actually liked. Not what you're supposed to like, not what's impressive or meaningful or aligned with your goals. Just what you liked, for no reason, with no witness. The psychology here isn't about regression. It's about trying to recover a version of engagement that didn't require justification. Childhood interests aren't better or purer, but they came from a time when interest itself wasn't suspect. When you didn't have to defend why something mattered to you, when mattering to you was enough. Adults who return to these interests aren't trying to go back. They're trying to locate the part of themselves that still knows how to want something without asking permission. The part that doesn't optimize, doesn't perform, doesn't justify. The part that just picks up the pencil, or the controller, or the cards, or the cleats, and does the thing. Not because it's productive, not because it makes a good story, because somewhere under all the curation and self-monitoring and rehearsed adulthood, there's still a version of you that knows what you like and doesn't need a reason.